I should have known better the second I saw the lanky figure hanging around by my pool fence. Trouble in this neighborhood never knocked politely. It just strolled in like it owned the place. And in this case, trouble came in the form of Ethan Johnson, the teenage son of the woman everyone half-jokingly, half-fearfully called HOA Karen. Now, before you think I'm exaggerating, you have to understand something. This wasn't your average homeowners association stickler. Karen Johnson was a legend. She could sniff out a trash can left at the curb 10 minutes too long. She once fined a family for having a trampoline visible from the road. She kept a color-coded binder of every violation she'd ever filed, complete with photos and handwritten notes. Some people say she enjoyed the power. Others say she lived for it. I say she'd sell her soul to enforce a rule no one had even agreed to. And her son? A carbon copy, but with hormones, entitlement, and a skateboard. He'd cut through my backyard dozens of times, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends, like it was his personal shortcut to the park. The first time I caught him, I thought it was an accident. The second time, I realized it wasn't. The third time, I warned him. By the 10th, I'd given up arguing and started locking things down, which is exactly why I'd installed the smart lock on my pool fence that afternoon. The latch on the gate had been loose for a while, and even when I put on a simple padlock, neighborhood kids found ways to jimmy it open. I couldn't afford the risk. If someone slipped into my pool and got hurt, or worse, I'd be liable. So I went modern, a keypad smart lock controlled by my phone with an auto-locking feature. No key to lose, no latch to wiggle open. I'd just finished syncing it to the app when I heard the distinct clack-clack of skateboard wheels on the sidewalk. Sure enough, here came Ethan, towel draped over his shoulder, goggles swinging around his neck. He skidded to a stop right at my fence, hopping off the board and tucking it under his arm. He didn't knock, didn't wave. Just went straight for the gate like he'd done it 1,000 times. "Hey," I called, stepping forward from where I was crouched by the lock. "Pool's not open, kid. You can't just come in." He turned, eyebrows furrowed, like I'd spoken to him in another language. "What do you mean?" "I'm just going for a swim." "My mom said it's fine." I stared at him. "Your mom doesn't own this pool, I do. This is my backyard." He looked at me like I was the crazy one. Then he reached for the latch, fingers curling around the metal. When it didn't budge, he frowned, gave it a harder yank, then noticed the glowing keypad. "What's this?" he demanded. "A lock," I said simply. "Nobody comes in without permission. That's not fair. You can't do that." His voice cracked with indignation. "This is like community property or something. My mom said everyone in the neighborhood can use it." I let out a humorless laugh. "Your mom's wrong. This pool isn't part of the HOA, it's my private property. You've been trespassing." The word hit him like a slap. His cheeks went red and he stepped back, crossing his arms. "You're gonna regret saying that. My mom's gonna freak when she hears you locked us out." "I'm not locking you out," I corrected. "I'm locking out trespassers. If I invite someone, I'll give them the code." Simple as that, he scoffed, muttering under his breath as he pulled out his phone. "Yeah, we'll see about that. I should have ignored him. I should have walked back into the house and left him to sulk." But 10 minutes later, I realized just how big of a mistake that lock had triggered. Because when I looked up from the patio chair, there she was, storming down the sidewalk in yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, phone in one hand, her other hand flapping in the air like she was leading a parade. Karen Johnson. "Excuse me," she barked the second she reached the fence. "What is this? What have you done to the pool gate?" I stood bracing myself. I secured it. With a lock. "This pool isn't for public use, Karen. It's my property. Your son can't just—" "Excuse me?" She cut me off, her eyes practically bugging out of her head. "This pool has always been a gathering spot. For years, families have used it. Children play here. It's part of our community spirit. And you have no right to suddenly bar access." I couldn't believe the audacity. "Karen, with all due respect, this is my backyard, not a community center. Do you realize the liability risk? If a child drowns, I'm the one sued. Not the HOA, not you, me." She waved dismissively. "That's nonsense. Nobody's ever had a problem before. You're being paranoid. And installing some kind of high-tech surveillance lock without HOA approval? Completely unacceptable. HOA approval isn't required for what I do on my property." "Yes, it is," she snapped. "Anything visible from the street must comply with community standards. And now we have this glowing keypad. It looks like a prison lock. It's ruining the neighborhood's aesthetic." Behind her, Ethan smirked like he'd summoned reinforcements. See, Mom? He's acting crazy. He locked us out and started yelling at me. I whipped my head toward him, yelling, "I told you not to trespass." Karen gasped, clutching her pearls like she'd just watched a soap opera twist. "Did you just accuse my son of trespassing?"
How dare you? He's a child.
"He's 16. I shot back. "Old enough to know when he's on someone else's property." Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see what the authorities think about this." And before I could even process the threat, Ethan whipped out his phone, thumb already dialing. He put it on speaker, his voice trembling with fake urgency. "Hello? Yeah, 911. There's this man locking us out of our pool. He's being aggressive. He's scaring us. Please hurry." My jaw dropped. Are you serious right now? You're calling the cops on me? For protecting my own property?" Karen smirked, leaning on the fence like she was already victorious. "Let them come. They'll see exactly what kind of neighbor you really are." Those next 15 minutes felt like an eternity. I paced my patio, muttering under my breath, trying not to lose it completely. Karen kept talking loudly on purpose, tossing phrases like dangerous behavior and unstable into the air, loud enough for nearby neighbors to hear. Curtains twitched. Porch lights flicked on. I knew half the block was now watching, just waiting for the drama to unfold. And then came the flashing lights. 2 squad cars pulled up, their beams sweeping across the cul-de-sac. Ethan straightened, puffing up his chest like a hero who'd just rescued the town. Karen raised her chin and flagged them down, her voice dripping with false relief. "Officers! Over here, thank goodness you came." The first officer approached, calm but alert. "What seems to be the problem?" Karen launched into her performance. "This man, this neighbor, has installed some kind of lock on the pool fence. He's preventing children from using it. He shouted at my son, threatened him, and now we're scared. He's clearly unstable," her son chimed in, pointing at me. "Yeah, that's him. He freaked out when I tried to swim. He trapped us outside. He's acting weird." My hands clenched at my sides, but I forced myself to stay calm. The second officer turned to me. "Sir, can you explain your side?" "Yes," I said firmly. "This is my pool, on my private property. I installed a smart lock to stop trespassing. This kid has been sneaking in for months, leaving trash, even bringing friends. I caught him today trying to get in without permission. Now they're calling 911 to flip the story." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Is this true, ma'am? Is the pool part of community property or his?" Karen opened her mouth and faltered. Well, it's always been treated like community property, for years. Families come here. But is it legally community property?" The officer pressed, her lips tightened. She didn't answer. I pulled my phone from my pocket, swiping quickly to the property survey app I'd downloaded months ago. Within seconds, I had the map on the screen, complete with boundary lines. I held it out. "Here, this fence, this pool, it's all within my property line. The HOA doesn't own an inch of it." The officer studied it, nodding. "That checks out." Ethan's smirk vanished. Karen's face turned red, her hands balling into fists. She sputtered. "This is harassment. This man is locking children out like prisoners. It's a safety hazard." The officer gave her a flat look. "Ma'am, the real safety hazard would be children breaking into a private pool unsupervised. If something happened, it'd be on him. He has every right to secure his property. And if your son tries to enter again without permission, it will be trespassing. Do you understand?" The silence that followed was thick. For once, Karen had no comeback. Ethan stared at the ground, scuffing his sneaker against the pavement. The officers wrapped up with a warning, directed at them, not me. Then, after a final glance, they climbed back into their cars and drove off, leaving us under the glare of porch lights and nosy neighbors' stares. Karen didn't move at first. She just stood there seething, eyes locked on me with a fury that could melt steel. Finally, she hissed, "You'll regret this," and stormed off, dragging her son with her. And though the adrenaline still pumped through me, I knew one thing with certainty. This wasn't the end. This was only round one. The morning after the police lights disappeared from the cul-de-sac, I thought maybe, just maybe, things would settle down. Karen had looked humiliated when the officers told her she and her son were in the wrong. I imagined she'd storm inside, cool off, and let it go. That was wishful thinking. Because when I stepped outside the next morning to grab the newspaper, I found an envelope taped to my front door with thick strips of packing tape. like someone wanted to make sure it wouldn't blow away. The HOA letterhead glared at me in bold navy blue, and right away my stomach dropped. The letter was 3 pages long, written in a tone that was equal parts smug and threatening. It stated that I was in violation of community standards for installing an unauthorized locking mechanism on shared facilities. The phrase shared facilities was underlined 3 times, as if saying it enough times would make it true. The letter threatened fines of $500 per week until I removed the lock and restored community access. I stared at the words until they blurred. Shared facilities? It wasn't even an ambiguous claim. The pool was mine. The fence was mine. The HOA had no jurisdiction past the sidewalk, but Karen had managed to twist reality into something that looked official, and worse, she'd managed to drag the board into it. I crumpled the letter in my fist and stormed back inside. My hands shook with fury as I grabbed my phone and dialed the number on the letterhead. "Good morning," the HOA office assistant chirped when she answered. "This is the Maplewood Homeowners Association. How can I help you?" "This is my name," I snapped. "I got your violation notice, and it's a joke. My pool is not shared property. It's on my private lot." There was a pause, then a nervous throat clear. Let me check your file." "One moment, please." I was put on hold. Tinny elevator music played. My anger built with every second. Finally, another voice came on the line. Deeper, more authoritative. My last name, this is Alan, president of the HOA board. I understand you're upset." "Upset?" I barked. "You've accused me of tampering with shared facilities. That pool doesn't belong to the HOA. It belongs to me." Alan sighed. "Look, this isn't personal." But Karen raised a concern. She presented photos to the board. "Photos?" I cut in. "What photos?" She submitted a picture of the pool and fence. It looks like a community space. She says families have used it for years." I laughed bitterly. "Of course it looks like a community space. It's in my backyard. People have used it because her son and his friends keep trespassing. That doesn't make it theirs." Alan's voice softened like he was trying to calm down a wild animal. "I understand. But perception matters in these cases. When multiple neighbors agree that a space is shared, the board has to—" I nearly exploded. "You're telling me because people think it's theirs, suddenly it is? That's not how property law works. I have documents. Do you want me to send you the survey maps the police saw last night?" There was another long pause. Alan cleared his throat. "That may be necessary. But for now, we're asking you to cooperate. Remove the lock until this can be sorted out." "Not a chance," I said flatly. "I'm not letting kids break into my pool and risk drowning just to satisfy Karen's ego." "The lock stays." Alan's tone hardened. "Then we'll have to escalate. Expect another notice soon." And with that, he hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, rage boiling under my skin. Karen wasn't just trying to annoy me, she was trying to rewrite reality. And she had the board under her thumb. That afternoon, as if to rub salt in the wound, I caught Ethan and 2 of his buddies rattling the pool fence again. I'd been watching from the kitchen window when I saw their shadows creep across the yard. They went straight to the gate, hands gripping the bars, pulling and shaking like animals in a cage. The lock held, of course, but that didn't stop them from laughing. "Bet I could hop it," one of them said. "Nah, my mom says he's got cameras," Ethan replied. "We'd get caught." Still, he kicked the bottom of the fence hard enough to make the metal clang, then flipped his middle finger toward the house. I marched out the back door and they scattered instantly, darting across the lawn and disappearing around the corner. When I checked the gate, I saw they'd deliberately smeared mud on the keypad like they'd tried to vandalize it. My patience thinned by the second. That night, after pacing the living room and cursing under my breath for an hour, I finally did what I should have done weeks earlier. I installed cameras, 2 on the back of the house, 1 directly above the pool gate, high definition, motion triggered and connected to a cloud account they couldn't tamper with. I even set the alerts to ping my phone whenever there was movement near the fence. If Ethan thought he could keep pulling stunts, he was about to get a reality check. For a few nights, nothing happened. The cameras stayed quiet except for the occasional squirrel or drifting branch. I almost convinced myself Karen had scared her son into backing off after the police scare. Then, one Thursday at exactly 2:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected at pool gate. Bleary-eyed, I grabbed the phone and tapped the notification. The video feed popped up. There was Ethan, plain as day, hopping over the fence like an Olympic gymnast. Two of his friends followed, one tripping and nearly face-planting into the grass. They were laughing, carrying a cooler between them. Within minutes, they were splashing in the pool, yelling loud enough to wake the dead. I watched in disbelief as they cracked open cans, beer, judging by the metallic shine, and started drinking poolside. One kid hurled a can into the bushes. Another dragged one of my lawn chairs into the shallow end, floating on it like a raft until it broke beneath him. By the time they climbed out, soaked and stumbling, the pool deck was a wreck. Beer cans scattered everywhere, a towel draped over my grill, and in the shallow end, bobbing like some surreal piece of modern art, a single sneaker. I sat there gripping my phone, my jaw tight. This wasn't just trespassing anymore. It was vandalism. Underage drinking. Criminal charges waiting to happen. The next morning, I didn't bother calling the HOA. I compiled the footage, clipped the clearest shots, and sent them straight to the local police department. Within hours, an officer called me back. "Mr., my last name, thank you for sending this in. We're reviewing the footage now. Looks like we've got multiple violations here. Would you be willing to file an official report?" "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. As I filled out the report online, I imagined the look on Karen's face when officers showed up at her door with evidence she couldn't deny. For weeks, she'd painted me as the villain, paranoid, controlling, unstable, but now I had proof her precious son wasn't just cutting through yards, he was breaking the law. Word spread faster than I expected. By the weekend, neighbors were whispering openly in their driveways. Some even approached me cautiously, almost guiltily. "Hey, I heard about what happened," one dad muttered as he watered his lawn. "If it helps, I've seen Ethan sneaking around too. Just never wanted to get involved." Another neighbor, an older woman who always kept her blinds shut, leaned over her fence one afternoon. "You be careful with that Johnson woman. She's got a temper. But between you and me, you're right. That boy's out of control." It was bittersweet. On one hand, I finally felt like people were seeing the truth. On the other, I realized how many of them had been watching silently, too afraid to cross Karen. The following Monday, another envelope showed up on my door. This one wasn't taped, but shoved so hard into the crack I nearly tore it opening the door. It wasn't from the HOA this time. It was handwritten. "Take the cameras down," it read in jagged letters. Or else. No signature, but I didn't need one. The handwriting was teenage scrawled, full of dramatic underlines. I held the note up to the nearest camera and smiled grimly. Let them try. The knock on Karen's door came earlier than I expected. It was a Wednesday morning, still cool outside, the sun barely cresting the rooftops. I just poured my first cup of coffee when I heard the unmistakable sound of police radios crackling down the block. I stepped out onto my porch, mug in hand, pretending to check the mail. 2 patrol cars were parked in front of the Johnson house, lights off but presence unmistakable. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains and over hedges, drawn by the sudden appearance of authority. Karen answered the door in a robe, her hair a frizzy mess, eyes wide with confusion that quickly morphed into indignation. I couldn't hear the exact words, but I saw the officer's hands holding a printed screenshot. My footage of Ethan scaling the fence, cooler in tow. Another sheet showed the grainy but unmistakable sight of teenagers drinking beer by my pool. Karen's face went through stages: shock, then denial, then the full theatrical outrage she reserved for HOA meetings. She gestured wildly, pointing toward my house more than once. I sipped my coffee and waved casually when her eyes finally met mine. She froze mid-rant, her cheeks burning red. The officers weren't buying it. Their posture stayed firm, patient but unmoved by her theatrics. When Ethan appeared at the doorway, still half asleep in gym shorts, his attempt at feigned innocence lasted all of 30 seconds before one of the officers pulled up the footage on a tablet. His jaw dropped, then clenched. He muttered something, running a hand through his messy hair. The scene stretched for nearly 20 minutes. Neighbors clustered in small groups now, murmuring. Everyone could see the show, and this time Karen wasn't directing it. She was the star, but not in the way she wanted. Finally, the officers issued what looked like a formal warning to Ethan, with paperwork passed to Karen for a court date or fine. Her voice cracked as she argued, but the officer shook his head, pointed to the paper, and left no room for debate. When the officers stepped off her porch, one of them glanced toward me. He gave the smallest nod as if to say, "We've got this." Then they left, their cars rumbling away, leaving Karen on her porch clutching paperwork like it was a death sentence. She caught me watching. For a second, she looked like she might march straight across the street and unleash hell, but instead she slammed her door so hard the windows rattled. For the next 2 days, the Johnson house was uncharacteristically quiet. No skateboard clattering, no Karen marching the sidewalks with her phone camera ready, no music blasting from Ethan's room. Just silence. But quiet doesn't mean surrender. On Friday, I received another letter, this time slipped under my door. It wasn't on HOA letterhead. It wasn't official. Just another of Karen's passive-aggressive manifestos. "You may have fooled the police," it began, "but you can't fool your neighbors. Everyone knows you've overstepped. Installing cameras, locks, filing police reports against children. It's excessive and dangerous. You're making enemies, and soon you'll find yourself isolated. Do the right thing, remove the lock, take down the cameras, and stop harassing my family." I read it twice, the corners of my mouth curling into a humorless smile. She still thought intimidation worked. She still thought her word could bend reality. But the tide had shifted, and I could feel it in the way neighbors started talking to me. That weekend I was mowing the lawn when Mr. Patel from 2 houses down wandered over. Normally he avoided me, worried about being caught in Karen's crossfire. But this time he leaned against the fence, lowering his voice. "You did the right thing," he said. "That boy has been a menace for months. My daughter stopped walking to the park because he and his friends harassed her. But Karen, well, she shuts anyone down who complains." I blinked. "Why didn't you say anything before?" He shrugged. "Fear. She makes people miserable if they cross her. She finds, she nitpicks. Some people just give in." He paused, then added, "But now, people are glad you stood up. You're not alone." That was the first crack in Karen's armor I could see. By Monday, the cracks turned into fractures. Word had spread that Ethan wasn't just caught trespassing. He was cited for underage drinking and vandalism. Parents in the neighborhood started whispering about whether their kids were safe around him. A few even pulled their teenagers away from hanging out with him, suddenly wary. Karen tried damage control. She marched from house to house with flyers about neighborhood unity and protecting our children from paranoia. But fewer doors opened. Fewer people nodded along. Some didn't answer at all. And then came the HOA meeting. Normally, these gatherings were dull affairs, arguing over landscaping contracts, debating the shade of paint allowed for fences. But this one packed. Word had gotten around and everyone wanted to see the showdown. I arrived late on purpose, sliding into a seat at the back. Karen was already at the podium, binder in hand, voiced she.